Well, hey there everyone. So welcome back to part 2 of making the Renaissance gowns with all of the thrifted material that I picked up over the years at Goodwill. So again, last week what I had done is I had made a bunch of skirts. So I made 2 outer skirts and then 3 inner interchangeable underskirts. So this week we now have to make the tops that go with these skirts. So I do still have to do a bit of research on how to do the tops, but what I'm kind of thinking is these dresses are actually kind of have the same style as almost one of the dresses from Parts of the Caribbean that Elizabeth Swann wears. So it's going to be a hoop skirt. You can see the slit in the middle of the skirt where it has a different panel, and then it has the sort of long sleeve top with a stomacher. So that's going to be the kind of style that I'm going to try and recreate for the top, at least, because that's kind of what I had in my mind, is just a long sleeve with some lace around the top and the side, and then about this long for sleeves, and then really big ruffles, and then of course the interchangeable stomachers, which I kind of have been playing with. Maybe I'll add some pearls or something, but we'll see when I get to it. So mainly what I was seeing for how they often put stomachers on is they would literally pin them to their corset and then pin the outer jacket as well to the corset. I don't want to do that. I want to try and think of some other solutions. So I was trying to think of maybe doing it so that the jacket part has a corset that you won't see because the stomacher will cover it. Maybe something like that, or I can do hook and eyes on the stomacher and the jacket and have those connect. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit, but for now I'm going to worry about the corset. So I am going to make a new corset for this video just because the one that I had previously, it needs an update. It was the first one that I'd done of that style and it's a little janky and I really could use a new one. So I did get a pattern from Etsy from this lovely person, and this is a stomacher with a busk. So this is a busk. So it's pretty much what they use to put it on, and then they'll tighten the corset afterwards, and it just makes the whole thing a lot easier. So that's kind of the style. It's a Victorian corset if you were to look it up. Here's some examples, and that's what I'm going to be using. It's definitely something that you want, especially when you have so many skirts, because it really helps support all the weight on your hips. So I've got the pattern printed out and taped together here. I'm cutting it out as we speak. And then I can go ahead and start cutting things out and sew things together. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So the first thing that we have to do is cut out the outer fabric and the lining for this corset. And then for both halves of the outer lining and the lining for this corset, I'm going to pin all of the pieces together and sew them. So we are going to be working in 2 halves for this because we have the 2 separate sides and they're both connected by the laces in the back and then the busk in the front. And then to keep everything flat, instead of ironing it, I'm just going to push all of these seams to the side and then top stitch over it, and it makes them perfectly flat. And when I top stitch, I'm going to top stitch really close to the seam, so it's not going to be stitching the ditch, but it's going to be really close to it. And then for both the halves, we're going to take the lining and the outer fabric, and I'm going to place them on top of each other, right sides together, and then I'm going to trim away some of the excess and then pin all the way around except for the bottom and sew it. And then after that, it gets turned right sides out and ironed. After it's turned right side out, you can go ahead and add the busk on both sides of the front. Apologies that I don't have like great instructions or any instructions on the busk. I'm just not very confident in how I do it. I don't think I do it correctly. So if you want more instruction on that, please look elsewhere. Now we're going to go ahead and sew the channels for the boning. Once all the boning is put in, we can put on the bodice tape at the bottom, and then the grommets and this corset is done. Okay, so it is day 2, and I've done a mock-up of the top. I did get a pattern from this lovely person on Etsy, and so this is kind of the pattern that I have. I'm only using the bodice and probably the stomacher pattern. So I was kind of going back and forth on if I liked this or not, but I think I do. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out material and see how I like the bodice, hopefully, afterwards. Now it's time to move on to the bodice. So like I'd mentioned, I did make a mock-up for this, and I did like how it fit. I did only have to adjust the arms, so I'm going to go ahead and use this pattern to cut out all of the pieces. Once we have the pieces cut out, we're going to sew right sides together, the two back pieces together down the middle. Once you do that for both the outer fabric and the lining, we're going to go ahead and add the darts in the back. And then we can sew the front bodice pieces on the sides and at the shoulders. And then we're going to take the outer fabric and the lining, and we're going to place them right sides together and sew all along the front and the neckline. Then that can be turned right sides out and ironed. Now it's time for the arms. So before we start sewing them onto the bodice, we have to sew them together. So we're going to fold the arms in half and place them right sides together and sew them. Then the armhole can be placed right sides together onto the bodice and sewn. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a little ruffle onto the sleeve. So I found this really pretty curtain which had a finished edge on it already. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut off a strip of this and then sew that in half, and then I'm going to ruffle it and then attach it to the bottom of the sleeve. And then I'm going to trim the bodice to the length that I want it to be, and then I'm going to go ahead and hem it. Now for the closure, ideally this would have been done while you were sewing the outer fabric and the lining together, but I didn't want to deal with it then, so I'm going to deal with it now. So what I decided to do was, instead of doing grommets or something, I decided to sew on these little loops of ribbon. So I just cut the little loops, and then I made sure that I fired the end of each of them so that they don't fray. And then I'm going to pin them to the fabric and then just sew them onto the inside of this fabric. And it doesn't matter if you can see the sewing on the other side, because I'm going to put lace down. So this is going to be what I'm going to use to lace up the top. So it's a little unorthodox, but it does work in the end. And then once those ribbon spots were sewn on, I'm going to go ahead and sew on the lace onto the front of this bodice. Now we're almost done, so the last thing I'm going to do for this is I'm going to cover up all of those exposed edges. So I'm going to take some bias tape and I'm going to put it on the bottom of the arms and then on the upper armhole. Alright, the first top is officially done. I've finished all the edges and I added all the lace and everything. So now this is probably where I'll stop filming, I think, for today. I do just have to put some little finishing touches on the other skirt, like how I put the lace on this skirt. I finally got some lace in. I got some of this lace in to put on that skirt, and that will also go on the matching top. So for the second top, I am going to do it in the same style, just because I have very limited time and figuring out a whole nother top would be a whole lot of stuff to do. So I'm just going to do this same style with the different lace, and probably the same lace for the little sleeves, and then that will be that. I also got some like pearl that I might add to the skirt. Again, I am just playing with things, so I might add some of that later too. So yeah, I will see you all in the morning to do the second top and all of these stomachers. The last thing that I did that day is I went ahead and put the lace on the skirt, and it was time for day 2. Except that night, tragedy struck. My snake fell and broke in half. But that's okay. I'm gonna super glue them together. Don't you worry. Alrighty, it is day 3 and hopefully the last day, and this is where we are at with the first top. So I need to start the second one in the green fabric, and it is going to be in the same exact style of this one because I don't feel like figuring out another thing. So that should be pretty quick now that I know how to do like the whole process and everything. And then I just have to do the stomachers, which should be fairly simple. So before I was planning on doing stomachers that went like over this little space here, but I actually, when I tried it on, I really liked the look of the like little lace here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make very simple stomachers just to go like in that space there. and not worry about like decorating them and whatever, because I really like the corsety look over it. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So I have to do the second top and then make 3 stomachers, and then I should be done. So I'll see you all after that. Now again, for the second bodice, we're going to do the exact same thing as the first one. So I ended up having just enough material to cut out all of the bodice pieces. And then just like the last one, we're going to take the 2 back pieces for both the outer fabric and the lining and sew them right-sides together down the middle. And then we're going to sew the 2 darts in the back. Then we'll take the 2 front bodice pieces and sew them together down the side and at the shoulder. And finally, we're going to take the outer fabric and the lining and place them right sides together and sew around the front and the neckline. Then the 2 arms get sewn together down the side, and then they could be added to the bodice. And again, I'm using the same lace as the last one because I did pick up 4 curtains, so I did have the perfect amount of these. And I'm just going to cut out the strips, sew them together, gather them, and add them to the bottom of the sleeve. And then once I was happy with that, I went ahead and I cut the bodice to where I wanted it, and then I hemmed it. And then again, I'm doing that same sketchy method that you probably shouldn't do with the little ribbons on the bodice. And then I added the lace around the front and the neckline. And then finally, it was time to close up all of the seams again. And again, I just used bias tape. Now, finally, it was time for the stomachers. So these are going to be fairly simple. So I just kind of cut out this vague shape. And so I'm going to cut out 2 of those, and then I'm going to put interfacing on both of the sides. And then they can be sewn right sides together except for a little gap, and that's where I'm going to turn them out, and then I can iron them, and then all 3 of these stomachers are done, and we are ready for the final look. Also, don't you worry, our baby boy is saved. Okay. Come on. Thank you. Now I can sit. Okay. There are these 6 dresses. I'm absolutely exhausted. That took forever changing in and out of everything, because I literally had to take everything off just to change the bottom skirt. So that took a while and I'm sweaty. I think these turned out so incredibly good. I think this one has to be my favorite combo. Yeah, this one has to be my favorite combo because I am partial to living greens. But I think the other dress turned out really good too. I like the fact that even though the dresses are exactly the same in pattern, they give off like 2 completely different vibes. Like the other one gives off like a lot of princess vibey dresses, and this gives off kind of like Elizabeth Swan dresses in the beginning of Pirates of the Caribbean. So this would be more of like a day dress in Victorian-y area, and then the other one is like you're a princess. And the crisscrossies give me like such Barbie dress vibes, which I absolutely love. So yeah, will I be making 6 dresses in 2 videos again? Not likely, if you ruin my lace. Okay, well, I'm exhausted. I think these turned out really good. I think the only thing that kind of went wrong is the other dress. When I like put it on for the top, the like shoulders kind of stuck up a bit, so I did have to do a little bit of last minute fixing so that they like actually sat on my shoulders. But other than that, everything else fit really, really good. These patterns were really great. The corset even worked out good. I did take it in a bit too much because when I was doing the pattern, I found it was like really, really large for what it was supposed to be. So I did take it in, but I took it in a little too much so that the spacing in the back is a little extra, but you can't really see it at all, but it gives me a great form, so I'm not that worried about it. So yeah, I hope you liked watching the construction of these dresses. Next week's definitely going to be a either off week or a very chill week. So anywho to do, if you like what I did, go and like and subscribe. I post most Saturdays, mostly at noon, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you for watching!